G'day. One of the things I like, particularly in the colder months, is a steamed pudding. And we've recently changed over some of our cookware, and so the pudding steam that I had is no longer available. And so today I made up a trivet just to sit the pot on, so it's above the hot surface on the hot plate, and I let the steam go around. So not a terribly complicated thing, but there are a few interesting bits in there. It uses the same wire bending tool that I used for making my screwdriver rack, but this time, rather than spot welding things together, I've TIG welded just in a couple of places here. I've got my wire bending jig set up in the vise here on the end of the mill table, and the reason I do that is basically it's a bit over 1 ton of mill. It's not going to move too easily, and so it gives you a nice firm base to work on. I've described this in a previous video. I'll put a link in there somewhere for that, so that's not a big deal. But one of the first things I'm going to do is do a practice bend on this piece of wire. I've got 2 marks here, one 80 and one 100 in from this end, and I'm going to position these in a repeatable spot, and then I'm going to bend it 90 degrees and see where that mark ends up. What I want to do is have 6 pieces, all bent the same and all symmetrical, so I need to know where those bends are going to go to. So you might just be able to see I've got that mark lined up with the centre line of the pin. I'll now bend that. And you can see that mark is moved around the corner there. So I need to work out how much that's moved. There are my 2 bends. You can see the mark, it's migrated around about the same amount, but I can work out now that if I want the centre of my bend to be 80, and that mark is at 80, I need to allow, say, 78 or something like that. So allow a couple of millimetres to put that bend right on the centre. Don't worry too much. You can see from this that the wires aren't in the same plane. That's easily fixed, so don't worry too much about that. It's more getting this nice, symmetric U shape, for want of a better term, flat-bottomed U. That's the feature I'm trying to get. That's going to be my axis of symmetry, so I'm going to start with that bend, do 6 pieces like that, and then start doing bends on the legs, and finally just give them a bit of a twist to get them where I want them. But that'll form a foot like that for me, which is what I'm chasing. So here are my, here are 5 pieces. Here's the 6th one here. I guess the nice thing is I've got all the ends the right length. This one here is sitting a little high. In fact, a couple of these are sitting a little high. I'll have to just open those up a little bit. But this is the sort of thing that I'm aiming for, is a sort of a symmetric, uniform thing. So this thing looks like it's been properly made rather than just bashed together in someone's shed. Once I've had a go at flattening these out, and that'll probably just be putting that on a parallel and then giving it the top a thump with a hammer and hoping that'll just spread it slightly. Once I've done that, I'm going to put a bend probably about there somewhere on both legs. And you can see now why I wanted to do this bit first, because if I tried doing that bend, then that bend, then that bend, then that bend, I'd have a cumulative error happening. Whereas if I've got it like this, I can now mark from that flat and say, right, that's where my bend has to be, and have a much better chance of getting those bends in the same place, the same height. One thing worth noting too, when I cut these to length, I cut them with an angle grinder, just because that was the quickest and easiest thing to hand. But I then went to the bench grinder and took put a bit of a chamfer on the end. Now these ends are going to get cut off when I weld everything up, but stainless has got this habit of having some really nasty sharp edges, so just as a safety point of view, clean up your edges even if you're going to cut them off anyway. Keep your fingers a lot happier. On to doing what you'd probably call the secondary bends at the moment. Once again, not too concerned about that because I can twist that out. In fact, I will be twisting that out anyway. But the important thing is to get both of those bends coinciding. Now, to do that, I've marked from the end there my distance, and I'm bending the same way as I did before, putting the mark on the pin and then bending around. But one of the nice things about this jig is that I can bend from both sides. So I'm bending that way, and then I'm turning around and I'm bending this other part that way. And that way I can get that symmetry that I'm chasing. So now I've got these to do. Here are my 6 pieces with the right angles put in. Now, the aim of this exercise, or the aim of this part of the process, was basically get everything, pretty much the same height. Most of it's all right. The one on the end here is a little bit high, and so I'll gently adjust that, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. But all the rest of it I can tweak. I can move things, I can twist things, and get them all, uniform. But the aim is that I want the distance between the surface is going to stand on and this to be, pretty much the same. Now this one, it's a little bit high, and that's I don't know why that is, but that's the way it is. The way I adjust these is I clamp that tightly in a vise with some soft jaws, so I'm not damaging my material, and then I'll come along with a hammer and just basically push that down and bend that back. And what that does is it just moves the bend just a little bit. And I only need a little bit here. I'm only millimetre or so out, so I should be able to do that on that. Worst comes to worst, I have to remake it. Sometimes you do, and that's why I have extra material around the place in case I do need to make another one or two up. I've finessed, whatever you want to call it, all my feet so they're around about where I want them. Now what I'm going to do is just put it in the vise here, grab hold of this bit, pop it in the vise, and then bend these feet out to where I want them, as well as bring them up so that they're roughly square. To use that, I've just got a trained piece of pipe here, and that slips on. And then it's just a matter of lining everything up. That's good. The design I've got is makes use of 60 degrees, so I just need to be careful of spring back here, but I think that I'm good with that. So there's my leg foot segment, and then I'm going to have a whole bunch of these just sort of spaced around, in 6 of them spaced around. When fabricating something like that, symmetry is important. So as you can see, I've got all my pieces stacked up here, and they nest nicely. There's a little bit of variation on a couple of these angles, but they're pretty much, for my purposes, identical. To work out exactly what length these legs had to be, I did a plot in AutoCAD, and so that's basically where the part will lie. You can either do it just like this, which I found was very useful because it didn't have lots of clutter on it to confuse me, or you can do a finished plot like that. Now, I'm actually going to be, or try to be, a little bit cunning, and it'll probably not work for me, but I'm going to use that to lie the pieces on top and then try tacking that and see whether I can do it and get at least a tack on without burning the paper underneath. We'll have to see about that one. The other possibility is, as I've done here, I've just scratched a couple of lines on my my welding plate here, and that's the other way of doing this, is that I can potentially, if I get this right, I can potentially build that up on here, hold it down with a bit of tape or some weights or something like that and do it that way. But I'm going to try the paper first because it might work. We'll see. Well, to my surprise, the weld on top of a bit of paper technique did work. All I was doing was some very light tacking, so minimal heat input. It has scorched the paper in places, but it's good enough that I've got a basic shape. I've got a lump of steel here, which I'm putting on some of these things so that I get the twist and all that sort of thing out of it. In terms of welding wire, I'm using a bit of 0.9 MIG wire for this. My rule of thumb is usually using a wire size as equal or slightly less than the joint, and this is 1/8 rod, and so you could probably say, oh well, you should be using 1/8 filler, but if you do that, you cool the puddle too quickly, and at the moment I'm just trying to establish a joint, and some of these are more successful than others. Once I've done that, I'll flip that over, do the other side, and then work from there. There's the end result. I've ground a couple of these welds down so they're a bit more flush. They're a little bit lumpy, but most of them are okay. One of the things that I've discovered over the years trying to do this sort of stuff is that you want to have that supported. When I came around here to do this, I had a block of material under there, block of metal under there, just to take any weight off, because what I find is if you've got something that wants to bend under its own weight with a bit of welding heat and molten metal around the place, it will, and stainless seems to be particularly bad for that. It'll give way at the moment's notice, but I'll go and do the stainless treatment on that just to get any residual free iron out the way. But apart from that, it's fine. It fits nicely on my scratch marks, so it'll fit the pot, so that's all good. Thanks for watching, and hope this has been informative. Another way to do sort of wire work.